been a minute, you know. You ever just get, like, depressed? That ever happen to anyone? And then suddenly you lose interest in things? That's not why I stopped posting. I'm not trying to, like, make an excuse for why that happened. The truth is I just got busy. And this isn't a priority. Let's be honest. The market for this sort of thing is, well, saturated. Yeah. I hate to say it, but there's not exactly demand to match the supply for, long form content on YouTube. That's sort of Twitch's thing, and let's be honest. At the moment, if you're gonna be on Twitch, you'd better be a woman. I'm gonna put it this way: if you want to be largely successful on Twitch, you'd better be a woman. Gotta be honest. The only reason I even followed anyone on Twitch in the past, like, year is because within about 15 minutes they talked about both Dark Souls and Magic the Gathering, and I was like, wow, it really captured my interest with those. Like, that's it, that's me, good work. Anyway, as I was saying, depression. I don't think I have it. Maybe I do. I could have it. I could have it if I wanted to. But I do think that people, modern day people, suffer from ennui a lot. And I suffer from it. I am people. I am one of those things. Because we're not at peace just existing. It's difficult. You know, we gotta be doing something. We always gotta be doing something. And a lot of times we want to be doing something exciting. It's why movies are a big thing. Why, for a while, and I think it's still the case, but whatever, neither here nor there. The entire entertainment industry was sort of obsessed with being a hype beast. You know what I mean? All it wanted to do was big and loud and, you know, look how cool this is. Holy shit, we're finally doing this thing. Wow. Look at this. It's all these things that you recognize. And, not to rag on any specific company, even if they are an easy target, but the problem with making excitement and ever-mounting impressiveness your like hallmark, your trademark, your key selling feature, is that that's a lot like dopamine. The happy brain chemicals, not just dopamine, but for instance, dopamine. Eventually, your audience, your folks that you are benefiting from, because they enjoy that sort of thing, they're gonna get tired of it. They're gonna be like, this feels familiar. You know, it's boring. There's a reason that new has such a shiny sensation just to the thing that it is. It's just pleasant. You're just like, oh, new. Ooh, that's different. There's a lot to be had when something is new, but once it's just itself, no longer a new itself, when it's just itself, well, that's just it. It becomes just that thing. It's not the new that thing, it's just that thing. I just remembered I left some stuff that I got delivered today somewhere else. Neither here nor there. Anyway. Right. My point is that whole ennui thing, right? The whole, like, disinterest and tiredness and what some people are probably thinking is depression. I say depression as if it's not a thing that exists. It exists. It's real. I think I grappled with it once in the past and more or less overcame it. And not in a, I'm so bored way, but in a, what's the point in fucking living if we're just gonna die anyway sort of way. Except it wasn't said so calmly. It was sort of said cowering behind my couch as if that was somehow going to hide me from death itself. Because honestly, I think part of the reason that it didn't get worse is because I was afraid of death. Not to say that I'm not still afraid of death. A lot of people are. Most people are. It's kind of a reasonable fear because, like, if most fear is founded in the unknown, death is one of the few things that, like, you can't ever know. The minute you start experiencing, you stop experiencing anything. And the people who experience it and return from it, I don't know how trustworthy their understanding of it is. I get a lot of conflicting reports. There's some who, like, insist, like, no, it's just as nihilistic as you can expect. And there are some people who are like, I saw God. For the most part, it seems like a lot of people see what they expect to see. I'm getting off track, but hey, that's ADHD for you. My point is, that ennui feeling, I've developed a belief lately within myself that thing is just sort of the result of a culture that doesn't know how not to be entertained, to be interested. And anyone who has, like, given meditation a serious try will have had a similar realization to this, that, like, oh, needing to do stuff all the time is kind of not doing well for my brain. And I find myself a lot of times sitting here at my computer looking at the icons of my... God, I probably have hundreds of games, not all of them downloaded because I don't play all of them. There were some that I played and are no longer good, or at least have lost that shiny new feeling. Or, you know, I've experienced everything they had to offer, and I felt complete about them. But a lot of times I find myself sitting here staring at those icons and just feeling ennui. Like, I look at something and I'm like, I know I like doing that. I know I enjoy doing that. I don't want to do that. And nothing seems to fit this set of criteria in my head that doesn't actually exist. It's like you look at one thing and then suddenly the criteria readapts itself and says, nah, that's not it. Even though, like, a minute ago you were thinking, yeah, that might be it. But you weren't really thinking about it because the minute that you start, like, really considering it, bam! It no longer fits the bill. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Hello, viewer. Anyway, I'm not gonna try and lead you on some sort of, like, meditative journey. I could explain it a bit. Unfortunately, it's really just gonna sound like ADHD. It is let your mind wander. It is just sort of like, woo, let go. try to find a way not to want things. Meditation is good. I think that it's mentally good for you, but that's not why we're here. We're here because I wanted to address a certain facet of that ennui that I've experienced, and we're also here because we want to play video games. We'll get to that very soon. I've got a couple in mind, and in any minute that criteria is actually going to agree with one of them. I was thinking about it, right? And I was looking at YouTube, because that's what we all do, right? We sit there, we can't decide what to do. We pop open YouTube, we scroll through the videos, and we're like, I don't want to watch any of those. I don't want to watch that channel because, I don't even know why I'm subscribed to them. And then we scroll through the videos of the channels that we do know that we're subscribed to and we watch regularly, and we're like, I just don't think that'll hit the spot. And then suddenly it turns out that spot is like way out of reach, But I thought about it more and more. I was thinking about video games, and I was thinking about YouTube, and I was like, I have a channel. I used to post videos to that. I have 2 actual videos, and all the rest are archived streams like this. I struggle with making videos. I made that one that I was pretty proud of at the time, Eternity, I think it was called. Don't mind the dogs. They do this. I've tried dulling the sound. It doesn't work. I'm sure that there's some way I could edit it out, whatever. I was sitting there thinking about it, about how I have this channel with 2 videos and a bunch of streams. And I was like, oh, well, that's it, isn't it? Because a lot of the time I would sit there and I would stream while I was playing a game that I would play normally anyway. And it's not like I was doing it to stream. I realized that I was doing it because having a audience, despite the fact that I was pretty certain most of the time that nobody was watching, or if anyone was, they didn't stick around for long, so on and so forth. That somehow dispelled the ennui. And I might be very close to admitting that I've actually just fired up this stream to help with said ennui, so that when I finally decide on one of these games, I stick with it. And I actually get some sort of fulfillment out of it. But anyway, that was a realization I had. That my reason for doing this was never about getting views. It was never about building the channel. It was never even about being seen. It was about receiving that sensation of, yes, what I'm doing right now is genuinely fulfilling. And maybe some of that comes from the fact that once I finish the stream and it archives itself, there is a permanent existence of that moment. And I think about that permanent existence as a sort of that's something that I crave. As I mentioned earlier, I kind of fear death. I like permanence. I don't like change. Yada, yada, yada. A lot of very understandable fears that we all have, and sensations that are very common to the human existence. And generally speaking, when people lack that sort of shared sense of those specific things, it's very gratifying for them, because that's one less thing that is huge to deal with and contemplate. But that permanence of having a video of a moment, or several consecutive moments, or perhaps even 16 hours worth of moments, is something that I seek heavily. And I get similar sensations sometimes with books, and part of that I think is because books take effort to read in a different sense than a video game takes effort to play, or going up a hill takes effort to do because you're walking, but it's mental effort of a very specific sort. And if you can manage to stick with it for long enough, suddenly that sense of fulfillment, that rewarding feeling persists throughout the duration of doing it. And maybe eventually you get tired of reading. You're like, okay, I got to do something else now. But it is very different when you stick to a slow task like reading over a course of time versus getting immediate satisfaction from something. Because reading, like, the whole point of the catharsis and the experience is that you're like working your way to it. You are experiencing a journey to it instead of getting now. And I think that's part of why binge eating is so dangerous, because you just keep building up a tolerance to it. And it's never enough. Whereas something like reading, you can binge, but it takes time to get your rewards from it. Like, you can learn to read faster, but the rate of consumption for that medium is limiting. You can't just shovel it all into yourself and then be like, oh, book done, next. You're like, oh, I'm getting pretty far now. You know, there's so much stuff happening, and you want more, but you gotta work your way through it. I like that. It's also one of the main reasons that I like writing so much, because it is that sort of like, you know, I've got all these places that I want to get to, but I gotta actually get there. I can't just be there the minute I want to be. Sure, you can sort of cheat your way through it by having the story start at an interesting point, but then suddenly you're like, yeah, but how did we get there? Story is meaningful. And I've thought many times about combining this great love I have for stories, storytelling, and story consumption with this passing interest that I have right here with output, production, visibility. The problem is, becoming published on something like YouTube is simple. I can sit here, I've got my camera, I've made a one-time investment into a camera, into a microphone, into a computer, I've found recording software, and I've opened a channel, and now it costs me absolutely nothing to put out whatever garbage I choose into the world. I can just do it. The problem with writing a book and getting it published and all of these other things is they cost a lot more money. And depending upon how prolific you want to be, you got to spend more money. And I understand that that's somewhat still the case with being visible here. Definitely. Absolutely. There's no way to become visible on YouTube without spending at least a little bit of money on it. And part of that is having quality equipment. Sure. Part of that is having the dedication to sit down and edit videos, which I don't have. Sorry, now I've noticed my fucking mess of a hair. Cursing. But getting published the right way is difficult. Any schmuck can go and spend, like, I think it's like at most like $50-some or something to get published as like an ebook or something on Amazon, and maybe they'll even go through the trouble of printing it. I'm sure that's a service you can provide. But the thing is, in order to be actually like out there and consumed broadly, that's not going to cut it. You're not going to get anywhere with that. You're just sort of going to go and then vanish. So maybe I have to go and take a look. Maybe I have to change my marketing. The problem is, of my, I don't remember how many subscribers, none of them are paying attention. Come on, let's be honest here. Maybe you saw me in your feed or whatever and like, oh, he posted again. That's weird. Why am I still subscribed to this guy? Maybe you don't even use YouTube anymore. I'd believe that. I'd believe that a lot of the people who are subscribed to me either have different accounts now, have moved on to other things, and don't really check in on YouTube more than like once or twice a month, something like that. And then there's some minority within that number that are actually active participants. I don't know. But I would be willing to try and put out audiobook-ish stuff here on YouTube. I don't think that I'm ever going to get away with reading someone else's work, so I'd have to do mine. The problem is, when I start thinking about that, I'm like, well, if I'm going to go that far, why not bother animating it? I don't want to have to do the voices for all my characters. Why not get a voice cast? And at that rate, fuck it. Let's just start an animated series. That's not happening. Once again, it takes funds and effort and whatever. So the conclusion that I've sort of reached is I'm going to wait. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to focus on living in the here and now, finding a life that functions, and I'm gonna keep my hobbies. Maybe I'll keep putting up silly little streams that take way too long. Maybe I will keep posting my written work to places, locations, and receptacles. More than likely, I am going to keep writing. It is one of the few passions that has stuck with me really, really well. Although I used to have a friend whose enthusiasm made it a lot easier to focus and stay productive. And I don't have that anymore. People drift apart as time flows, and it's unfortunate, but it is how things are. C'est la vie, mon ami. This much is true, yes. But my intention is that one day, maybe when I'm having a midlife crisis, maybe sooner, maybe later, I will look at myself, see that I have not a lot, but an acceptable amount of money to spend, and I will say, you know what, it's time. I will gather myself, I will think about things, and then eventually I will put to plan, and follow a process for getting published. Not necessarily notoriety. Not necessarily in a way that is hugely popular and suddenly nets me a bunch of attention, but in a way that I get traction. Like I'm going somewhere. I'm not just published. Well, that was fun. Good. So long. Because I want to stick with it. I want to write fiction, and I want it to be my legacy. I don't want to fade into nothing. I want to tell stories, and I want my stories to be heard, listened to, absorbed. I don't care what's done with them after that. That's not entirely true. I think I'd like them to be respected. It is sort of, in a very real sense, like taking my intellectual self and producing offspring from it. Not living, breathing offspring, but still and very, very passionately made offspring. And I don't think any creator wants to see their mental offspring warped away from what they wanted for it. I mind you, this is not to say that interpretation is an ugly act. It's more that I mean, when you do something, when you put something out into the world that you are proud of and you created yourself and you had intentions for, there are mysteries that you are perfectly comfortable with people solving in a way that you had not intentionally imagined, in ways that surprise even you. And at the very same time, you can be almost afraid, or at the very least concerned, that someone will come along, look at it, and say, well, I like this, this, and this, but I don't like these things about it. So, I'm going to put out into the world not a creation of my own, per se, but a creation that takes from you and instead puts it in a way that you definitively did not intend. I have thought a lot about I'm struggling not to offhandedly insult people. I have put a lot of thought to what I think of fan fiction. And on the one hand, I love the idea of people being so enthusiastic, so incensed by a work that they feel their own creative instinct burst for a moment, and they're like, I want more, and then they make that more, and that's cool. I love that. And I like ones that like try to fill in gaps that really truly exist. I find issue, however, with those that create their own gaps, if that makes any sense. That see how things went one way and say, well, I reject that. And some part of me associates that with a way that I once thought and later found to be a very dangerous and distressing and potentially disastrous form of thought for myself, which was like a mixture of escapism and like full-on rejection of reality. I'm not calling fiction reality. What I'm insinuating is that things, even fictional things, are one way. And sometimes they're many ways, but in a lot of ways, they aren't certain ways. There's many things that they are, and there's many things that they aren't. And one thing can be many ways, and also simultaneously be not certain ways, or many other ways it isn't. And I think that the obsession with what isn't and the desire for it to be is a very, very, very unhealthy sort of obsession. And maybe there is idle interest in such things. I mean, fiction as it is such a thing. It's what could be, what could have been, and what might yet be. But there's like this presentation, right, of a headcanon that outright declares, I know how things are, or how things that aren't, and I've chosen this interpretation of those things. And a lot of times it's fine. It's like, well, my headcanon is that after the story ended, this and this happened. And seeing as there's, nothing past the end of the story as there is, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. There's nothing refuting that in the first place. Like, it's very clear that you're looking at it and like, yeah, okay. And there's also like looking back at history and saying, well, what if Joan of Arc survived? What if World War One was fought with like mutants? What if we got to space after the Russians already landed on the moon? We being Americans in a certain sense, not an important point. And that's acceptable. That's like reasonable. That's very interesting, and it's cool. And there's parallel universism, where you're like, okay, we have this one fictional trail. Here's another fictional trail that takes place in another universe. The problem I find is that when you look at someone else's creation and you decide that your interpretation of their creation is better, is more valid than the one that they presented, or the other interpretations that they left it open to. Maybe there's one that the original creator had in mind. Maybe there's multiple that they had in mind. But you could very easily walk up to a lot of creators and present one that they hadn't even thought of, and they'll be like, dang, that's good. I'm really glad you thought of that. Now I'm adding that to the list of ways that I might think about it. Or someone will be like, no, but I can see where you're going with it. That's interesting. But like a direct rejection is troubling. Maybe it's a slippery slope ism for me to think of it this way. But I think that clinging to and defending that sort of devout escapism lends itself to a less stable grip on life itself. And in my understanding of the ennui and pain of non-doing, I think that you come to a very similar state where you're existing in want. And to stick with my meditative realization, being at peace with what is and what isn't, and then going off and creating what isn't, what hasn't been, what won't be, is far healthier than being in pain and being discomforted by what is and what isn't, and then going off and creating and changing and rejecting. Because when you come back to what is and what isn't, you'll be pained again. And you'll yearn more for that thing that isn't, that you want to be. And that thing that is, that you don't want to be. And you'll just sort of be tormented by it. I think that the 5 stages of grief should really just be called the 5 stages towards acceptance, or steps towards acceptance. Because accepting anything can follow that path. Some things you can accept immediately, but things that you don't want to accept will follow a path like that, where at first you're upset about it, and then you get frustrated with it, and then you get saddened by it. You're like, well, what's the point? I'm not even gonna engage with this. It's so annoying. And then there's like the most difficult step, I think, in the whole thing is like that call of like what isn't, saying, just exist in a world where the way things are is how you want them to be. That's so tempting. That's so desirable. You look at something like that, this world that isn't necessarily perfect but is better, and you want to live in it. It consumes you. And in a very real sense, it consumes you. Because you're you're sitting there stuck with what isn't, feeling hurt by it, and then you get this offer for what could be, what you want to be, where you don't have to hurt. And you don't realize it, but what you're doing is exchanging one kind of hurt for another, more subtle kind of hurt. And the thing is, you're just throwing it down the line. You're throwing a lot of that hurt that you thought you were trading away, and you're saying, later. You're just hitting that, I'm not ready to update Windows 7 today. Some other time in the future. And then at some point, maybe, not always, but generally, Windows 7 decides it can't wait any longer and submits the update for you. And then you're just stuck, knowing that you took that little bit of pain of knowing that what you want isn't, but pretending it is. And you allowed that enduring pain to continue and to persist. And you still have to deal with the pain that you thought you got rid of. And that hurts. Oh my God. It just... I mean... Because not only do you have the original amount of pain that you were looking towards and fearing, but now also you have like the added understanding that you couldn't get rid of it, that you have to deal with it anyway. And then acceptance. And a lot of people, I think, are afraid of acceptance because that means taking that fearful pain into yourself, experiencing it, truly, well and truly allowing it to like envelop you, to pain you. I mean, how do you live with that? That's acceptance, though. That's what that's about. And I think look, I don't think that you can go out into the world and force other people to inherit what you believe. Because one of the hardest things in the world is acceptance. It just is. When you want things to be one way and they're another way, and you have to take the other way that they really are and replace how you want them to be with that, it's so difficult. A lot of people find it easier to just make what they want it to be more and more convoluted and more ridiculous. And it's a lot like when they thought that all the planets went around the sun or the earth in circles, and they kept having to explain why they didn't go in perfect circles, and they're like, well, it's just another circle on top. There's two circles. There's a circle that goes around the other circle. And when that wasn't enough, they added another. And that's what a lot of people would rather do than accept things, than take a painful truth. They would rather have a complicated and messy and constantly proven imperfect lie. Because it's so much easier to say, okay, I was only a little bit wrong. You're still more wrong than me. Anyway. This is wrapping on to be a little long. And I still haven't played a game yet. I might not. I might just not. I'm beginning to think that I won't. But I think my point in this is that at some point in thinking through all of these things and grappling with acceptance and what I want from the future versus what it looks like I'm getting from the future, and what I wanted in the past versus what I ended up doing, I'm thinking that I kind of want to talk. I think that this video is a perfect example of the sort of thing that I'd like to do. Now, granted, what I'd like to do and what I end up doing don't always intersect. But my idea is that I want to put out videos, of course. I want to make more edited projects. I want to put more and more polish into them until I can actually look back on them at any point and say, maybe it wasn't my best work, but it stands the test of time. But more than that, I want to keep streaming. And after thinking about it, I realized that the streams that I liked the best were the ones where my intention wasn't just, well, I'm going to launch the stream and I'm going to play the game that I already wanted to play because fulfillment. I think the ones that I liked best were the ones where I set out with a lot on my mind, a a lot I wanted to say, something specific that I wanted to do, or something broad that I wanted to do. And when I was finished, I felt finished. I was like, that stream is a unit. It didn't just sort of trail off into the end. It didn't go on unnecessarily long. Oops. And it was well paced. And I think that I like doing this. I like talking and putting my thoughts into the void, not just for me to hear, but for anyone to hear if it finds them. I like doing that. And one of my favorite ways of doing that is finding a game that doesn't require a lot of my brain power and that will wait in the background while I talk. Something that doesn't require consistent amounts of attention through and through. And that makes a good backdrop for just chatting. And it weirds me out that YouTube doesn't have a category for videos that matches just chatting. So being able to call it gaming, despite the fact that it's somewhere between philosophy and just chatting, is what seems to work, so long as I actually do some video gaming therein, which I didn't do this time. Point being, I may do this again sooner than, last time. And maybe it'll be reasonable. I'm also gonna, fulfill my campaign promises. I'm gonna keep writing. I've been writing, believe me. Got a little book that I've taken in my pocket whenever I've had to go places. Don't write in it every day. That's stupid. Anyone that tries to set a ridiculous goal like keep up good work every single day, no. You gotta try every day. Even if you get nowhere, you gotta at least try. And if you don't succeed, at least you tried. That isn't a bad thing. Anyway. Writing, videos, playing video games, and I'm hoping to do more reading as well. Regardless, there's stuff that I need to do that I can't do from this chair. So, I will bid you good night, or good morrow, or good life. And maybe we will see each other again.